The notification arrived at 11:47 on a Sunday night, not a message from a client, not a project update. A single screenshot forwarded to me by a number I didn't recognize with no caption, no explanation, no context. Just an image. It was a WhatsApp conversation. Serena's name at the top, my sister-in-law, the woman who called me every Sunday evening without fail, who laughed at my jokes and asked about my work and always said, "I just like talking to you, Marcus. You're the sane one in this family." The thread was 22 months long, and every entry, every single one, was a report. Here is what I knew that nobody else in that family knew. I was not the mild-mannered, moderately successful staff architect they had spent 9 years quietly dismissing. I was a 40% equity partner in Meridian Group, a commercial real estate development firm whose flagship project, the Meridian Tower, a £34 million mixed-use development in the center of the city, had just received full planning approval 6 weeks earlier. My stake on paper was worth $6.8 million. It would become liquid in 11 months. Every Sunday, Serena had been calling me, and every Sunday night she had been filing her report. They had been surveilling me for 22 months, and in all that time, they had never once thought to look up from what I was doing long enough to understand what I was building. Before we go any further into Marcus's story, we'd love to know where you're watching from. These stories travel further than we ever expect, and it means the world to us to know you're out there. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you're finding this story as gripping as we do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Now let's go back to Marcus and to the Sunday call that changed everything. I met Diane Holt at a conference in my late 20s. She was sharp, funny, and genuinely beautiful in the way that has nothing to do with how a person looks. She was curious about everything, argumentative in the best sense, and she laughed like she meant it. I fell hard, most people do, with Diane. What I didn't understand then, what took me the better part of 4 years to understand, was that Diane existed within a family that functioned less like a unit of love and more like a privately held corporation. The Holts were a property development family. Gerald Holt, her father, had built a modest empire of commercial leaseholds and residential developments, and he wore that empire the way other men wear their war medals. Always and always visibly. In the Holt family, your worth was a number. It was discussed, revised, and ranked at the dinner table with the same casual precision other families reserve for the weather. Diane loved me. I believe that even now. But she had been raised inside a system that measured love in square footage and annual revenue, and some part of her, the part that called her father every Sunday and laughed nervously at his jokes, had never really left that system behind. I did not know this for a long time. I should have known it sooner. We had a shared iPad in the kitchen. It was nobody's really. It had started as a recipe display, graduated to a newsreader, and eventually become the household's communal forgotten device, the way these things always do. I was looking for the name of a restaurant Diane had mentioned. That was all. A restaurant name. I picked up the iPad, opened the browser, and the last active app loaded instead of Safari. It was Serena's WhatsApp. She had been logged in on the iPad and forgotten about it. Or perhaps she had never thought to check. I scrolled up out of instinct, the way you do when you pick up a message thread just to orient yourself. I scrolled up looking for context. I found 22 months of it. The thread was a group chat, Serena, Diane, and Gerald. My name featured in it frequently. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The restaurant name I had been looking for was entirely forgotten. Let me tell you what was in those messages, because the audience of this story deserves to understand the full architecture of what had been built around me without my knowledge. The first report, April, 22 months ago. Serena had called me on a Sunday, as she always did. We'd talked for 40 minutes about a project I was excited about, a civic library commission I'd been shortlisted for. I told her more than I should have, probably, because she was warm and she asked good questions and I trusted her. Within 2 hours of hanging up, she had sent Gerald a near-verbatim account of everything I'd said, including the projected fee, the competing firms, and my confidence level. Gerald's reply, interesting, so he's still pitching, not winning. Tell him it sounds wonderful next week. The second report, 7 months in, I'd had a difficult quarter. 2 projects had stalled, planning delays, the kind that happened to every practice, and I'd mentioned to Serena that cash flow was tighter than usual. Nothing dramatic. Just honesty, the kind you extend to someone you trust. Serena's message to the group that night, he's stressed, mentioned cash flow. I think this might be the moment Diane has been waiting for. Gerald's reply came within 4 minutes. Good, keep listening. The third report, 11 months ago. Diane and I had had an argument, a bad one, about the future, about children, about direction. Private, the kind of argument that belongs only to the two people inside a marriage. Within 48 hours, Serena had relayed it to the group in detail. Gerald's reply, he sounds unstable, note that. The fourth report, 6 months ago, I'd been called to a meeting at Meridian's offices. I hadn't told Diane the details, only that I had a late meeting. Serena mentioned on our Sunday call that she'd heard I was busy with something new. She was fishing. I gave her nothing. She reported the nothing. He's closing off. Something's changed. He wouldn't talk about the meeting. Diane's reply, he never tells me anything. It's like living with a wall. And then the fifth, 4 months ago at Gerald's quarterly progress dinner. I had attended these for 9 years. I had sat at that table 9 years and tolerated questions about my billings, my client list, my 5-year plan. I had smiled and given measured answers and eaten the very good beef Gerald served and driven home in a quiet that Diane always misread as contentment. That night I returned from the bathroom to find Connor, Diane's brother, Gerald's heir apparent, mid-sentence. He finished it anyway, as men like Connor always do. He looked at me, considered stopping, and chose not to. I'm just saying, Dad built something, I'm building something. Even Serena married into something. Diane married a man who designs other people's buildings. There's no shame in it. It's an honest trade. Not everyone can build. He reached for his wine. Gerald did not correct him. Diane looked at her plates. I sat back down, picked up my fork, and ate the rest of my dinner. Under the table in the inside pocket of my jacket, my fingers found the pen. The pen was a Mont Blanc Meisterstück. Matte graphite, weighted perfectly, the kind of object that was designed to feel like an instrument rather than a tool. I had owned it for 3 years. I had used it once. The night I signed the Meridian Group partnership agreement, Thomas Adami had slid the document across the table in his glass-walled office on the 14th floor, and I had uncapped that pen and put my name to 40% of everything Meridian would ever build. Thomas had looked at the signature and said quietly, as though the words were doing all the work they needed to, "You understand what this means, Marcus. In 18 months, you'll be able to buy the building we're sitting in." I had capped the pen and put it in my pocket and driven home to a house where nobody knew. That was the night I decided not to tell Diane, not yet. I had needed to know first, needed to be certain that what she saw when she looked at me was a man, not a portfolio. I had needed to conduct what Thomas would later call, with characteristic dryness, a stress test. I had not anticipated that the test would run 22 months and be administered by her entire family with the thoroughness of a forensic audit. 3 weeks after the progress dinner, I sat alone in my home office at 1 a.m. and opened the Meridian client portal on my laptop. The project valuation had been updated that afternoon. My 40% stake, $6.83 million, projected liquidity date, 11 months. I sat with that number for a long time, then I opened my desk drawer and put the pen carefully back inside. Thomas Adami had been my architectural partner for 11 years before he'd pivoted into development. He was brilliant in the specific way that rare people are brilliant, not loudly, not performatively, but structurally. He understood how things held together. He understood, perhaps better than anyone I have known, the relationship between what a foundation can bear and what it will eventually reject. When I called him the morning after finding Serena's WhatsApp thread, he listened to the full account without interrupting. This took 19 minutes. When I finished, there was a silence of approximately 4 seconds. Then he said, "How long until the gala?" The Meridian Group annual charity gala was in 6 weeks. It was the first public event at which I would be listed, in the printed program, on the venue signage, in the evening's formal address, as a founding partner of the firm. 6 weeks, I said. Then you have 6 weeks to decide who deserves to be in the room when it happens, Thomas said. I would think carefully about that list. I told him I already had. Good. I'll have the programs printed with your full title. And Marcus, wear the gray suit, not the navy. The invitation went out 4 weeks before the gala. Printed on Meridian Group letterhead, heavy cream stock, the firm's embossed crest in the upper left corner. Addressed formally, Mr. and Mrs. Gerald Holt and family. I hand-delivered it to Diane and told her I thought it would be a lovely evening, that Meridian had been a client of the practice for several years, and that I thought Gerald would enjoy the venue, the Sable Room, on the top floor of the building that Thomas and I had, in a previous life, designed together. Diane said it sounded a bit corporate. I said I thought she'd enjoy it. Gerald RSVP'd within 24 hours. He had tried to purchase the building twice and been outbid both times. He would not have missed this evening for anything. Serena called me the following Sunday as always. We talked for 43 minutes. She asked if I was nervous about the gala. "It's so nice that they invited you as a guest," she said. "Yes," I said, "it is, isn't it?" I had the Mont Blanc in my jacket pocket the entire call. I did not touch it. I didn't need to. 6 days before the gala, Thomas forwarded the WhatsApp screenshot to our legal team. Within 48 hours, a document had been prepared. He would arrive at the gala at precisely 8:15 p.m. with a copy in a gray envelope. I pressed my gray suit. The Sable Room holds at capacity 220 people. That evening, it held 194, close enough for intimacy, spacious enough for status. I arrived at 7:45. Thomas was already there, standing near the bar with the quiet confidence of a man who had built a significant portion of what surrounded him. I found the Holts near the window table, where Gerald had positioned himself with the unconscious precision of a man who always finds the best sightline in any room. He was in conversation with commercial property investors. Connor was beside him, slightly too loud. Diane looked beautiful. Serena was scanning the room. She spotted me first. "Marcus, you look well." "Very official," she gestured at the program. "Are you helping with the event?" "In a manner of speaking," I said. Gerald extended his hand. "Good of you to get us in. These events can be hard to ticket." "Not for everyone," I said. At 8:15 exactly, I saw Thomas cross the room with a gray envelope in his hand. The evening's formal remarks began at 8:30. The MC opened by welcoming the guests and acknowledging the firm's charitable partners. She then moved to what she called a special acknowledgement of the founding partnership that has made Meridian what it is today. She read out 2 names. Mine was the second one. And Mr. Marcus Webb, founding partner and 40% equity holder, whose architectural vision and long-term commitment have been central to everything this firm has built. I watched it land. Gerald's head turned first. Slow. The way a large piece of machinery changes direction. Connor stopped mid-sip. Serena looked at Diane. Diane was looking at me. I did not look away. I waited for the applause to settle. Then I stepped toward the table. I set the Mont Blanc on the white tablecloth between Gerald and Diane, gently, precisely, in the space between their glasses. Gerald said, "What is this?" "That is the pen I used to sign the Meridian Partnership Agreement 3 years ago. I thought you might want to see it since you've spent 22 months trying to find out what I was worth." 40%, I said. 6.8 million on current valuation, liquid in 11 months. "That's what Serena was trying to find for you. I thought I'd save the Sunday calls." Serena made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I placed the printed program beside the pen, my name in print with my title beneath it. "You told Connor at your dinner 4 months ago that I design other people's buildings, that it's an honest trade. Not everyone can build." Gerald's jaw tightened. I remember that line because I wrote it down. The same way I wrote down the February report, where Serena told you I was stressed about cash flow, and you replied that it might be the moment Diane had been waiting for. The same way I wrote down the March report where you told her to keep listening. Connor said, "That's private." "It was private," I said. "My marriage was private. My finances were private. My calls with your sister were private. You made them a group project. I'm returning the favor." Thomas arrived at my shoulder and set the gray envelope on the table. "That's a copy of the partnership agreement. The signature page is at the back. You'll recognize the pen." Gerald opened his mouth and closed it. For possibly the first time in his professional life, Gerald Holt had been handed a set of numbers he hadn't been allowed to prepare for. "This," I said, picking up the Mont Blanc and placing it back in my jacket pocket, "is what you couldn't find in 22 months of looking. Not because I was hiding it, because you were looking at the wrong thing." I turned to Diane. "I wanted to tell you in a different room than this one. I'm sorry that this is how it happened." Then I walked to where Thomas was standing, accepted the glass he offered, and spent the rest of the evening doing what I had always done. Building things, quietly, in plain sight. Gerald Holt left the Sable Room that evening without speaking to me again. I watched the body language shift around him, the way a room recalibrates when a man's authority has been quietly revised downward in public. The investors left shortly after. The following month, 2 of Gerald's commercial tenants, both of whom had been in that room, declined to renew their leases. Connor's consequence was smaller and in some ways more complete. He had spent years borrowing his father's reputation as collateral. When that collateral depreciated, even slightly, the borrowing became visible. Within 6 weeks, the project he had been leading for Gerald's firm was handed to an outside contractor. The industry is smaller than it looks. People talk. Diane and I separated 4 months after the gala. Quietly, legally, and without the kind of warfare that would have served nobody. I had loved her truly. What broke us was not a single night in a glass-walled room. It was 22 months of a door she had opened and never closed again. Some structures are not demolished, they are simply decommissioned. The Meridian Tower broke ground 8 months later. I was on site for the first pour. Thomas brought champagne in paper cups. We stood in the mud and drank it and said very little, which is usually the right amount to say. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 9 months after the gala. It was handwritten. 2 pages in Serena's careful, slanted script. No return address on the envelope. She did not ask for anything. She did not request forgiveness or a conversation or a response. She wrote that she had convinced herself for 22 months that she was protecting Diane, that the calls were a kindness, a way of keeping the family informed. She wrote that she understood now that this was a story she had told herself to make a behavior comfortable that she had always, somewhere, known was wrong. I think I knew who you were all along. I think that was exactly why Dad wanted me to keep calling. She wrote that she had not spoken to Gerald in 4 months, that she had recommended a therapist to Diane, that she did not expect a reply. The last line was, "You were always the sane one. I'm sorry it took me this long to act like it." I read it twice. I folded it and put it in the same desk drawer as the Mont Blanc. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. The most dangerous surveillance is the kind that wears the face of love. Serena called every Sunday for 22 months. She laughed at the right moments. She asked the right questions. She made Marcus feel seen and then reported what she saw to people who wanted to use it against him. But Marcus understood something that the Holts, with all their property and all their ledgers, never quite grasped. The most valuable foundations are the ones you build in silence, not because silence is strategic, because some structures deserve to be finished before anyone else is allowed to walk through them. He didn't build the Meridian Tower to prove a point. He built it because it was the right thing to build. The Holts were simply standing in the wrong place when it was unveiled. What do you think? Was Marcus right to wait as long as he did? Or should he have confronted the family earlier, before 22 months of Sunday calls had accumulated into something that couldn't be quietly fixed? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story moved you, if you've ever felt watched by the people who were supposed to be in your corner, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one, and we'd love to share them with you. Thank you for being here.